right, good day, everyone, and welcome back to the Dr. Coach Show. I am your host, Dr. Coach Danny Pueblos, and today I have my good friend and mental performance coach, Samantha Gilmore. How you doing today, Samantha?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Like we were talking about before, I wanted to bring you on because you have a very unique perspective and experience that I wanted to share with the listeners, especially those who are thinking about working in our field, right, in performance psychology, because there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that I feel that your experience, you could definitely talk about that, based on your experience. So I appreciate you coming on, and I'm looking forward to having this talk with you.
Absolutely. I'm here for it. Hit me with the tough questions.
They won't be too tough, I promise. Okay, they won't be too tough. We'll just be talking about you, which most people like to do, right? Like talking about ourselves a little bit. No, but take me back. Take me back to when you first started thinking about working in the field, because I know I get asked the question a lot, like, in addition to what the heck is performance psychology or sports psychology, like why did you get into the field, right? So, like, what's your story? What do you tell people?
Yeah, it's crazy to think. I mean, we still are trying to educate people around what sports psychology is, what performance psychology is, and to think back about, more than 10 years ago is when I really started thinking about sports psychology and what I wanted to do with my future career. And, it really stemmed from playing sports. I played golf and softball really competitively. Both have very unique mental components to the game. Golf, somehow I just figured out and was really successful within that area. And then in softball, I had a coach that honed the mental side of the game a little bit for me. And so I always say, I was good. I wasn't great. So I was somewhat talented, but it was the mental side of the game that made me so much better and able to get a college scholarship and extend my career for softball. So in understanding what that did for me, I wanted to go on and help other people figure that out and kind of extend their careers and enhance their performance as well.
Awesome. And so you mentioned that you dabbled in, you played in softball and golf. And we could start with either one, but what are some common mental challenges that you remember experiencing as an athlete?
With golf, everything's a self-paced task, which is where we know the mental side of the game comes in. So you're consistently inside your own head and controlling the game with everything going on with the mental game. So you see it in one area in golf where all the pressure is kind of stemming from yourself and your own experiences and your self-talk and things like that. Where in softball, you have a couple other outside factors going on that can be really impactful to how you're thinking and how you're feeling. And so there's definitely different approaches and considerations with the mental side of both of those sports.
Got it. Yeah, and that's so true. I tell people it's like when you look at these different sports, what I've noticed, and I remember experiencing this as an athlete, the more time that you have to think, the more like potentially dangerous it could be, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
you look at golf. That's why I tell them golf is like right up there, right? If not the
I
number
know.
is one of the top three of sports where you just you're going shot to shot and you have all that time to yourself, right? Like it's not that fast paced motion like other sports where I mean, yeah, you could get in your head, but it's a lot more. It's like it's just you, right? It's yourself, the
Yeah.
ball, and the hole, right? Um,
Yeah.
that's where I think just the mental game is just so. I mean, it lives there so much, as compared to other sports. I mean, again, other sport, even in softball. Like, what position did you play in softball?
Oh, I hit every position on the field, except I stopped pitching after probably about 13 years old. But I got to a place where I probably wasn't fast enough to play the shortstops and the center fields and things like that. So I loved catching. And part of that was because of being able to control the game a little bit. And so that was a fun aspect for me. And I spent a lot of time at first base and second base in college.
Nice. Yeah, and because there's a couple of different dynamics with softball and baseball, as you know. Whether you're a hitter, a pitcher, on defense, there's so many just different aspects of the mental game that can definitely play a role, right? And
Mm-hmm.
um, and speaking of baseball, how do you feel your experience as a softball player, in addition to your knowledge and understanding about the mental game and mental
Mm-hmm.
performance? Um, how do you feel that helped you? Because I know you've done some work in professional baseball with the New York
Mm-hmm.
Mets. During your time there, how do you feel that your experience as an athlete, especially in softball, has helped you, kind of be successful in that field?
I think it helped in a few different ways. And one, before even getting to working in professional baseball, I feel like I just had a better understanding of the sports psychology research and the material that we were learning in grad school, because I was able to apply it to my own experience within competitive sports at a pretty elite level. So going into baseball, not only did I have a pretty solid understanding of how to utilize and employ the skills within mental performance and sports psychology, I was able to break that down and really relate them in baseball terms. And then, of course, it helped with the rapport barrier where I was able to say, hey, yeah, I played too, or get out there, throw the ball, have some catch. I even, had to go in for BP a couple of times just to prove myself. But it was, I mean, I think it, let's say it just helped in terms of my readiness to take on that role. I was a couple steps up in terms of being ready to get into that position.
That's awesome. What a good experience that would have been, just taking BP and just playing catch. Like, do you feel like that you were like you kind of put the players more at ease in any way, like being out there versus like saying, "Hey, come to my office and let's talk there," right? Like, talk to me about the differences between the two.
There's a big difference. And it's just in terms of the way the player feels about kind of the vibe of the conversation and what they're trying to get out of it. I definitely tried to create both opportunities as much as I could. So we did create a safe space where we had offices for the players to come in. I often had yoga mats or couches where the players would come in and have their meditation time or even their nap time, and have some good, comfortable conversations there. But they definitely would catch me out on the field as well. If I could get out there during BP while they're standing around waiting for their turn, just check in how they're feeling, how games are going. Natural conversations can occur out on the field, especially when players are much more comfortable with the idea of mental performance and things like that.
Awesome, awesome. And did you work like exclusively with one level, or did you kind of bounce around?
My experience with the Mets, so I spent 5 seasons with them, and I was so lucky because I went right out of grad school as an intern. And so I had a year with a rookie ball team back, a couple of years ago. We had rookie ball. That's not really in existence anymore for minor league baseball. But I was full time with this rookie ball team as an intern. So I was able to focus on the guys playing for that team and what we wanted to create as a group. And from there, they hired me on full time. So I became a mental performance coach for high A at that time. And the next year was 2020. So very interesting year where we, had spring training, part of spring training, and then did a lot of virtual work and support in that area. And after that was given the coordinator role to kind of guide and direct where the department was going to go within the player development system. So both domestic and international players from AAA all the way down. I got to be there for it all.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great experience, and being able to kind of see that in both roles that that you've been able, or a few roles that you played within that organization. And
Mm-hmm.
because some people only see like one side of that, right? And that's why, again, another reason I want to bring you on, because your unique experience. So talk to me about the difference, because a lot of, especially in pro ball, with different organizations, you see, especially for people who want to learn more about what's the difference between just a regular coach and like a coordinator. Like, what was your experience with that, as far as like the differences between the roles?
Yeah, it's not necessarily terminology you hear too often outside of baseball when you hear coordinator. And really what that means is just kind of the supervisor of a department within the player development system. So you set kind of the department goals, you set the processes and things that you're going to put in place within that department, and then help manage the team, right? We were really lucky. I had a team of 5 mental performance coaches. So we had pretty full coverage across the organization where we didn't have many players wanting for somebody in person. You pretty much had somebody there full time or roving between 2 teams where they were able to support both what was going on at the individual level as well as instill some things at the group level for the teams.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate the feedback. Yeah. Cause yeah, again, it's, and that's why I've seen baseball as being ahead of the game, just, sports, and seeing how, and then you see differences among organizations, how some have a very solid, program. Some of them are just starting out, and which hey, it's still a good thing. It's growing, and mental skills training is being implemented, more and more these days.
Yeah.
So I think it just, it's a good understanding to know that stuff, right? And even with your experience working with these different athletes, and I know baseball is very unique in how a lot of these athletes, like you said, are coming from different countries. What was your experience as far as working with athletes that maybe didn't speak the same language as you? Well, or like how was that kind of because I would imagine, because I hear it all the time from our different colleagues in the field, how sometimes there's like a language barrier. So what was your experience with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I mean, if you don't speak Spanish, there's a language barrier. It's bound to happen. And one for me, I got to learn so much from these international players because they were willing to teach me about their culture, about their language, about their experiences. And then not only that, I did travel down to the Dominican Republic where our academy was there. So I got to almost immerse myself in what the experience was for our baseball players and our international players down there. I think, if your goal is to work within professional baseball, you should probably have on the to-do list, learn Spanish, or try to get as much background with that language as you can. I definitely found it challenging. It wasn't something that was easy, and I am definitely not a bilingual speaker. However, I think there's nice ways to kind of meet the players in the middle, whether that's being the one to work really hard to find the translation for them because they want to have a conversation, or if that's the one making sure that you have translation set up for your presentation and you have English and Spanish and things like that. And then additionally, I just found that I was able to read body language really well with those players. So maybe I didn't necessarily know what they were communicating through their verbal language, but I was able to see what they were communicating through their body language, whether that was positive or negative, if I needed to approach versus how they were feeling with what was going on in the game or practice at the time. So
that's awesome. Yeah, and that's what I tell people. It's the same thing. Learn Spanish, because I know like my Spanish is getting there. It's I didn't grow up speaking it. I just grew up speaking English, and it's such a great tool. Because you get a lot of Spanish speaking players. You get some from Japan, Korea, other countries as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I tell people, like, don't let that deter you, right? Like as you've done, like let that be an opportunity to learn, right? So not only do you learn the language, but learn about the culture, learn about them, right?
Oh yeah.
Even when it's not only with the language, but even if you have a mental coach who is asked to work with an athlete in a sport that they've never worked with before or have no clue about. I know I've been in the situation many times, having to work with a badminton player, having to work with water polo, working with a fencer right now. Like I'm like, it's all out of my realm, but I look at it as an opportunity to learn about them, learn about what the sport is, and And I really feel that it can definitely play a role in building that rapport that we want to get, right? Like, because like I said,
Absolutely.
a lot of people like talking about themselves and what they love to do, right? And
Yep.
I know some people are just scared. Oh, like I don't know, I've never played soccer, I never played softball, and I can't work in this. Like no, it's an opportunity for you to learn and just not only just help you build a rapport, but just grow as a professional too, right?
We have to have a growth mindset as much as we encourage our players to, and just being open to learn new things and being willing to put an effort in those areas is absolutely key to this role.
Yeah, and and I know since you've had that experience working with these different athletes, one thing you did bring up is that especially during when COVID hit in 2020, you were having to kind of adjust to like the virtual setting.
Yeah.
Um, what what if any have been like differences in how you've approached providing mental performance training, regardless, of the sport or clientele, when you look at it in person versus like virtually?
Yeah. Well, what 2020 showed us was there's this whole area that I don't think we had tapped into as a field yet. And part of that was because if I think back to grad school, ethics surrounding technology and texting or calling clients was a gray area. And so for me, it wasn't necessarily something I had explored within my career yet. I wasn't using texting or calling as a service, and it was more in person at the field with my players. That was easier at the time because I was working with one team at a time within the organization. When 2020 hit, it became something that was not a choice anymore, right? It became something that we had to do and we had to figure out. And the world of Zoom was born. So we now know what Zoom can provide and offer. And I do think that there were so many benefits that came from that and learning the world of offering virtual mental performance services and sessions. But there were also some challenges that came with that too, right? That we have to consider in terms of now, what does work-life balance look like if you don't have to be at the field to have a meeting? You can just hop on the Zoom and things like that. So I've definitely become more comfortable with virtual consulting and use it. It's necessary to be able to support a wide range of athletes, especially at a large organization like a professional baseball organization. And I think it's tailoring the service to your client and what's best needed in terms of virtual and in person.
Yeah, definitely. It just makes us and our services just be able to be accessed, internationally, basically, right? I mean, it's not just limited to someone that lives down the street from us. It's someone they can reach out. And as a consultant now, hey, sometimes you might get those random phone calls like, hey, like, oh yeah, I live in across the country, but I see you doing good work. Can you help me out, or can you help my kid out? They're dealing with this stuff, right? And so like that stuff is going to come up, but the opportunity is there, right? Not only as practitioners to be able to help people, but also the clientele, right? Now they're able to have access to whoever they want, basically, whoever they choose to serve as a coach.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, you mentioned some differences in how I approached it. And it does change things, right? Because now we're not in person. Maybe we're not spending that large percent of observation time, which we normally would consider as really important within the field. And so it's finding ways to maybe overcome that, whether that's getting clients to send you videos to review when they're implementing things or when they're at practice, and you're giving a lot more to the client's self-awareness and their own assessment of how things are going and what's going on than maybe when offering in-person services.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like we always tell our clients, and we always harp on this stuff, having to adjust, right? We had as a world, we had to adjust during that time, right? And
Tell me about it. Yeah.
we had to practice what we preach. Like, okay, well, yeah, we can't be there with you on the field or in the clubhouse. how we're going to adjust, how we're going to do this. And we had to.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like a ball player in the middle of a game. If you're going over 2, you can't just call it a day. Like, oh, you got to know at least one more at bat, in you. And
Yeah,
what are you going to do, right? So
absolutely.
that's why I love sports. There's so much crossover between sports and life, that you could apply across the board. That a lot of stuff that happens off the field can be tailored to on the field and vice versa. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but one thing that I know that you mentioned too as well, that another reason I wanted to bring you on is to talk about um, your experience working in professional sports,
Mm-hmm.
because like we kind of chatted about before, um, it's a sexy position. Yeah, I want to work in pro sports, and even at the ASP conference, there was a talk given, and a couple of our colleagues who work in the field are like, "Hey, who wants to work in professional sports?" And like every hand just shot up,
Right,
and then they're
right.
like, "Okay, well, let's tell you what it's really like to work in professional sports." So like, because I know you mentioned the work life stuff too, but talk to me about just
Mm-hmm.
what's it like to work in pro sports, and like what's the work life balance, and how long are you gone, like, all that kind of stuff that gives us a good insight about.
Yeah. The sexy aspects are there. That's what we know about, right? Where
Yeah.
one, not only do you get to be, proud and boast about what you do in your work and the title behind your name and the organization you're paired with, but there's also the challenges that are faced with kind of what professional athletes are faced with, right?
Mhm.
The time away from home, not necessarily getting to be close to your social network. And then additionally, I think it's the challenge of being on every single day for so many days in a row with whatever that season is, and being present there during that time. You kind of ride the emotional roller coaster, the roller coaster of focus during the entirety of the season. And so there's a lot of great things that come with that profession, but there's also a lot of challenges that in a lot of ways we have to practice what we preach and work on those things like maintaining focus and drive and things like that. And moreover, you kind of got to consider the challenges that come with it. Professional sports is a position that offers contracts. So oftentimes you're looking at yearly contracts, sometimes 2 or 3 year contracts, but you're talking about a role that you're signing on to for a year. And then you get to the end of that year and you're just hoping to sign on again, whether it's the same leadership, you've done a great job and you're reviewing with the organization, new leadership comes in and you have to sell yourself and say, here's what I've done, sign me on again. So there's a lot of instability that comes with working in professional sports. And additionally, your assessment of your job is based on the success of others, right? So you can't really prove the work that you're doing. And it's more so being reviewed by how successful those individuals walking out of your office are.
Yeah, I appreciate the insight. It's so true, especially especially the part how people working in professional sports are just like that. It's a very similar lifestyle than the athletes and the coaches. Which is it's not talked about enough. It's not, and that's why just talking to people about
Yeah.
my experience working with professional athletes. Like there's this misconception that, and this kind of goes like with celebrities in general, but like, like they think, more money equals like no problems. Like they're exempt from being human, right? Like, no, it's, there's challenges across the board. Like, yeah, they, especially the ones at the major league or the higher ups, like they can afford nicer cars than the general person or nicer
Mm-hmm.
houses, right? But it doesn't exempt them from being human. And I've talked to many athletes who, have a hard time, especially, I remember just talking about, with a sports agency I used to be with, we used to have a lot of newly drafted baseball players, and
Mm-hmm.
like some of them went to college, near their home. Some of them didn't, but it's like, oh my gosh, I've heard stories of like, yeah, my girlfriend broke up with me that I was going to propose to,
Mm-hmm.
I lost friends, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm having to move and go away from spring ball, or just go into training, right? So those stories are there. And
Yeah.
and that's why, I think just, talking about this stuff is important, because just to make people just in general aware, and especially future practitioners, that this stuff is going on. And it could definitely play a role in how someone's performing on the field, because there might be stuff that is lingering that, maybe they haven't really told anyone about, that they're just kind of pushing through, because just like how you were, right? Just like anyone else who's working in pro ball, like they're working for a contract. And sometimes they don't have time to talk about the other stuff, or they feel like it's not important, right? And they're just like, hey, I'm trying to survive, especially at the lower levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to work my way to the show, and so there's all these pressures, among other things, that can definitely play a role. And I think it's important just for the general public, and just, especially future practitioners, to know what they can potentially see themselves like talking about with athletes.
Yeah. And baseball specifically asks a lot of their athletes when you think of the minor league system, because you're not drafted into the organization and guaranteed a shot at the major leagues. And oftentimes you're talking several years before you're even close to that chance. So these athletes are fully committing to this dream of playing professional baseball with a small percentage chance of getting there. And in that time, you're being asked for 2/3 of the year to be away from family, to be living in hotels or apartments, not making money, and things like that. So there's a lot of challenges facing these athletes. And then it was really interesting for me to have conversations with some of the players where they thought, once you make it to the major leagues, all the problems are solved, right? There's no mental health issues. You have all the money that you need. Everything's great. And it's eye-opening, I think, for them when we tell them all the reasons. It's almost opposite of that. It actually becomes more challenging. You're facing adversity at a much higher level on a much bigger stage with much bigger stakes. So the pressure becomes higher. You're on a world stage with everybody watching you, and failure at that level almost means, the game is over. Where in the minor leagues, we still have the opportunities to fail, and you're working your way up. But once you get to the top, it's maintaining that and staying there. And in my opinion, in a lot of ways, that's more challenging than what you're experiencing throughout the minor league system.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Yeah, yeah, because it's your livelihood we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And not everyone, is the Mike Trouts or the Mookie Betts making these huge contracts, right? Yeah, a lot of that's not the majority. People don't realize that's not the majority, and same thing across sports. So you think of every sport, they all have their their all-star players who are making all this money, but that's the minority, and it's always other athletes too. And don't get me wrong, like they're having to maintain at the highest of the highest levels, right? Talk about like the all-stars and like the all-time greats, but it's other ones too that, hey, like, yeah, I made it, but how am I going to stay here, right? How am I going to work for that next contract?
How long is that career? And oftentimes the minor league career is longer than the major league career. And in a lot of ways, I started talking a lot about the goal isn't to make it to the major leagues. The goal is to make it there and stay there for a long-term career. Because I think maybe what's not really known or recognized about professional baseball is you have a whole lot of minor league players that can go up and support a major league team in a season for one game or two games or three games, and then maybe never see the major leagues again. So yes, they made it to the major leagues. They played in a few games, but then were never called back by that organization, or able to establish a career within the major leagues. So it's the hidden side of baseball that maybe people don't know that much.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I appreciate your perspective on it. Because it's so true. It's so true. Like in the general pop, they just see what's on TV. They see what's on social media. And there's so much more that goes into it, and that's where I feel as practitioners, we're able to see and learn more about these things, learn more about the challenges. In addition, yeah, we see all the good
Mhm.
stuff, the sexy stuff, right? And
Yeah.
but you don't really hear the other stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah. I'm guilty of that. I entered the career with the ultimate goal of working at the major league level for a team, and not really knowing some of the biggest details behind the way a minor league system functions. And I found myself after year one and working with the rookie ball team saying, man, I don't even think I could believe rookie ball. I love the impact that occurs here and the way in which you're able to support these athletes. And it looks much different at the major league level in a lot of ways for practitioners. It's much more enjoyable with those athletes that are more moldable, and additionally, really, really striving to make those differences for performance enhancement in their game.
Absolutely, absolutely. So talk to me about that. Now that you bring that up,
Mm.
talk to me about um, and this is just across your experience, since you've been starting in this industry. Um, talk to me about how like different it's been for you as far as working with clients, athletes that are open to what this sports psychology stuff is, performance psychology, versus those who are kind of skeptical or are like, I don't know, I've been doing this for a while, so talk to me about you, like what you've experienced and how you've been able to kind of overcome those kind of barriers that, because a lot of times they'll come in with the wall up because they're like, I don't know if I can trust you, first of all. Second of all, I don't know what this sport, I don't know this sports psychology stuff. What is this stuff? Like, how has your, approach been to that, or your experience?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting to see the change and the buy-in over years with athletes. Each generation has a different perspective because of the time that they grew up and learned and played the sport. So I think it was my third year working with, one of my favorite things to do was work with the new draftees. So the draftees coming in, you have bright eyes and bushy tails, and I'm there to be like, here's what it's going to be like and here's what to expect, and it's not all rose colored glasses type things. And so what I found was as my time went on, the new classes of draftees that came in were much more experienced with the idea of mental performance and mental skills. Not that they had all received that training or had universities provide that training, but they knew the terminology. They kind of knew that this was something that could really be helpful and an area they could invest in within their game. Now, the older generation players and the players that have been around in the game for a long time, it was more so of probably finding the right person to connect with. We all, in the same way with counseling and mental health, you find people that you relate to better in terms of how they approach the practice, how they approach the conversations. And sometimes they had to fail and get broken all the way down to be willing to kind of come into the area. But I think as time's gone on, you're seeing coaches and organizations buy into this so much more, that with that push behind you, with the coach support, that manager support, and the leadership support, you're going to have so much buy-in from the players because they're fully understanding the people who are making the roster moves. So it's support from the right areas, and then it's also trying to determine who's in front of you and the way in which you need to approach them for them to feel like this is useful and beneficial for them.
Yeah, that makes a world of difference when you have that support, when you have these athletes who have like coaches who are open to it, at least open, right? Because I know that's one thing I've encountered, is whether it's with players, coaches, parents, as some who are completely open, they're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Some of them are kind of like, I'm open to it. I don't know much about it, but I'm open. Others who are just like completely shut off, like
Yeah.
and I think that's it's gotten better. I agree with you as far as that goes. Um and I think we're going to see it being utilized a lot more in the younger levels, because that's usually how things go, right? You look at the college, high school, youth leagues, like they kind of see what the professionals are doing, and hey, if it's working for them, let's try it out, right? And that's usually how things go. And it's like a trickle down effect, and this is one of those things that more and more organizations and even just other sports, incorporating mental performance training, um, even within baseball, like there's some organizations that have like a solid top down program of mental skills, and others again we're kind of on the early stages, but you're seeing the progression, you're seeing the development just across the board. I think it's great, and that's going to help that buy-in, and that's going to make our lives easier because
Yeah.
we're not having to be salespeople and trying to sell them like what we're doing. It's like, hey, we're not. It's not a gimmick here. What we're working on, what we can provide in its mental training is actually can be useful, right? And you
Yeah.
can point to say, hey, like look at. I think I just saw today. I think someone posted something about, or I think Aaron Judge, like just give a lot of credit to the mental skills program that they have with the Yankees.
Mhm.
And with his, he was MVP. You saw what he did last year, like so. Like when you have these other, pro college, high school youth programs, seeing there's the Aaron Judges of the world, right? Say, oh, like if he's using it, hey, it's helping him. Maybe I could do it, So like I'm seeing that so much more. I'm sure you are too. I think it's a great thing, and it's also it's an indication of how much we're continuing to grow in the field.
Yeah, isn't that so crazy to think about what the role and the job would look like if we're not spending 60-75% of our time like perfectly packaging the information or trying to convince somebody that it's important? I can't imagine the impact that we're going to be able to have when we're not spending our time doing that. But you're right. I'm getting so many more youth athletes and parents reaching out for support in this area, and I'm really happy to see that. And I think it's great because what we're going to find is maybe that we're able to support sport enjoyment a little bit more within that youth training and the approach we're taking as a country to youth sports. So I'm happy to be able to get in there and try and help and make an impact in that area as well.
Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. And I think it's gonna, and I think what this stuff has also done, in addition to like mental health talk in general, mental health awareness across sports, I think it actually like has humanized these athletes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and because they're you see a lot more athletes talking about mental health, or like working on their mental game or what have you, and it's showing people like, hey, these are just regular people. They're yeah, they play the sport very well. They get some of these people get
Mhm.
paid a lot of money, but and they kind of like, oh, I guess because yeah, for the longest time, these athletes, and until they're still to a certain extent, right? They're like treated as like deities, right? Like, oh, like,
Yeah.
it's like they're perfect, like they're inhuman. So, but now it's like, no, these athletes are actually coming out and talking about, hey, yeah, it's not easy
Yeah.
sometimes. It's like it's all the glitz and glamour you see. It's not always like that.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful thing. And I really respect those individuals willing to use their platform to talk about mental health, not only mental performance, but mental health, because in opening up in that way, it not only humanizes them, but it allows others to understand, hey, if this amazing person that's so great at this one thing, this guy or this girl that I love watching needs mental health support, it would make sense that maybe I need it as well when I'm experiencing certain things. So they, in a lot of ways, using their platform, have expanded our field almost to a point to where we can't even offer the amount of support needed. There's so much influx of people wanting and looking for mental health support, and our practitioners are limited. So I think it's a great thing. The field's expanding.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of the field expanding,
Mhm.
um, if you were to be asked by someone who is looking to break into the field, whether it's just work in the field or work in professional sports, what is some like general advice you would give them?
Yeah, I'm doing a workshop on this now. And with the attendees, the idea is one, that they understand the field and the job market for what it is right now, and additionally how to prepare for that and kind of get that in with the networking and finding the job and landing it, and then as well as how to be prepared once you get that role. But part of what I spoke about is the age of networking nowadays, I think, has fallen with too much percentage on LinkedIn. I think there's too much comfort in the social network area where you can just reach out to anybody on there. And perspective wise, these individuals in roles like myself are receiving, 10 to 20 to 30 messages a day on LinkedIn from pretty much strangers asking them for advice or support or internships or opportunities. And so really, if we fall back to the old school ways, I think that's your best way, finding a connection or being connected to somebody already working within the field. Now, you can do that through personal connections. I remember my mentor, Bob Tewksbury, who is widely known within the field, especially within baseball. He played golf with my grandpa at their country club, and that's how I was connected to him. And so it's crazy. But anyway, you can find a connection. And then additionally, go to the workshops, go to the in-person conferences, go shake the hand, stand in line to ask your question. And then right after that, because there was 30 to 50 other people that did that, send that follow-up email and say, here's what I learned from you today. Thank you so much for that information. Is it cool if I keep you updated with where I'm at in my path and things like that? So for me, that's going to be a more sure way into the field versus with LinkedIn. I don't really know you or know if I can refer you to a position, because I really respect referrals from my colleagues in the field. And I trust that they've done their background homework on that individual who they're referring to me. And I want to provide the same to them. So I refer those network contacts that I have more personalized connections and experiences with.
I love it. A lot of good stuff, man. A lot of good. That's gold.
Oh, good.
That
Good.
is gold. No, honestly, yeah, because I remember being in that position of trying to figure out. First of all, I have people telling me, even like family members telling me, "Why are you getting into this? Well, this is not even a thing. No one's doing this stuff." I'm like, they're doing it, just want to know about it, and just seeing how and so and I personally love seeing just so many people just popping out of nowhere, like little just sprouting out of the ground, as far as like students, grad students, mental performance coaches, like I think it's great. I think just see the growth in the field and see how more and more people want to work in it. And that's why I appreciate you and the other guests that have on the show, for providing insight and guidance and advice, because some people are kind of going in blind and not knowing where to go or how. I know this thing with LinkedIn, but that's all I know. It's networking. So, but I agree. I'm old school too. Like when it comes to that stuff, like, go talk to these people in person, go to these workshops. And so especially with ASP, they have the annual the big conference, but also the regional ones, right? So like go to those and just talk to people, build networks, and that's how you have to be active. You can't just sit on your hands and expect something to fall in your lap. That's not how it works, and utilize those connections. Like, I mean, like with your grandpa, it's like, so you never know who knows who, and then we might have to have a conversation real quick, or I appreciate you doing reaching out. But that's where the magic happens. But it's just staying active, like you mentioned, and building relationships, and then getting that experience and growing from there.
Yeah, build those bridges and really, really reinforce that over time. Stay connected with those network contacts. Yes, we're a new field and we're to some degree a small field. We are growing at a very fast rate, but you never know who's going to be in a hiring position a few years from now, or who's going to be in an organization that you want to work at and could act as a network contact for you. And then additionally, once you get in each world, like if you're working at university athletics, that's an even smaller population of network contacts versus baseball. And so you really do want to present yourself in a great way with these network contacts and always maintain and reinforce those bridges with them, because they're going to be the next hiring party for a position you want. It's guaranteed every time.
I love it. Samantha, you brought gold today. You brought the fire. I love it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And so if anyone wanted to like follow you or get in contact with you, what would be the best way to do that?
It's funny because I'm going to say LinkedIn. But
After all that, you're gonna go back to
yeah.
LinkedIn.
No, I do try and keep social media and things like that private, and because I don't like to engage with it that much, so I don't like to put my workspace there.
Sure.
But I am starting performance headquarters, so I will have that up and running online, a website soon where you'll be able to kind of read a little bit more about the field and things going on and what we're learning, and additionally book sessions or things like that with me. So look for performance headquarters, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I would say I wish everyone the best of luck. If there's workshops out there that I'm a part of, I would look forward to you joining those with me.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again to my guest, Samantha. It's been a pleasure. A lot of great stuff, across the board, and I look forward to seeing what you're going to, what your next chapter is going to look like. I know you're doing great things. I can't wait to see the next, great, thing that you're going to do in just in general, and the people that you're going to be helping. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. So, all right, y'all. Well, hey, that will do it for today. Thank you again for watching. If you like what you see, tell your friends, tell your family, subscribe below, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you. Take care of yourselves.